My question is, what are the expressed needs of Children's Choice staff for engaging in documentation and reflective practice? Abstract. Like the Children's Choice approach, the Reggio Emilia approach is based partially on Lev Vygotsky's theory of socio-cultural constructivism. This approach is uniquely suited to support high-quality out-of-school time programs where the premier features are relationships, empowerment, and a sense of belonging. Most formal educators receive no formal education in the Reggio Emilia approach, much less out-of-school time practitioners who receive little or no pre-service education at all. So recruiting people with significant prior knowledge in this approach is very rare. So, whatever we want our people to know about this approach, we have to teach them on the job. Our current practitioners have a strong, capable image of the child. They are very proficient at designing a high-quality environment, which we call the third teacher. They are good at empowering children and giving them a voice in programming, yet they struggle with implementation of documentation and reflective practice. We ask these practitioners about their understanding of and need for engaging in these specific practices. By listening to, organizing, and interpreting their responses, we learned a lot about their reality and about what they need from their leaders in order to engage in these valuable practices. The top leadership team is composed of 13 out-of-school time program directors, 4 associate directors, myself, the organization's co-founder, the storyteller, the resource development coordinator, and 3 programs coordinators who oversee the program directors. We have all spent the last 2 years learning about and practicing gathering documentation and reflecting on documentation together. There are no other people more qualified to speak to the needs of out-of-school time practitioners in general, or especially about the needs of Children's Choice staff. Out-of-school time practitioner qualifications typically do not require any formal education beyond high school. At Children's Choice, we have a mix of college graduates who mostly work in full-time positions and college students who work part-time in the program in addition to taking college courses and/or working second jobs. Many of them study education, but students in our teacher education programs do not study the Reggio Emilia approach. In the first phase of this study, I facilitated an open-ended discussion with our top leadership team about what they thought our practitioners needed in order to more fully engage in documentation and reflective practice. I videoed this dialogue and then transcribed the complete conversation and analyzed the data, highlighting parts of the conversation that described a need. I organized this data into a list of broader categories of possible needs for the next phase of the research project. In the next phase, I prepared a draft of a survey about documentation and reflection based on the list of needs from the top leadership team and my literature review about the needs of various educators and successful supports shown to be successful in other educational contexts. The leadership team reflected on the survey, making several revisions. The survey has both open-ended and closed questions. There are closed questions asking them to rate their current understanding of documentation and of reflective practice as good, some, or little. They are asked to rate the frequency that they engage in these practices as regularly, occasionally, or never. In the list of potential needs that they have around these practices, respondents are asked to rate their agreement with each need being a personal need for them using a 5-point Likert scale of strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. For every strongly disagree response, the need was assigned 2 points. For every agree answer, the need was assigned 1 point. I entered the data from the closed questions into a spreadsheet and later into a graphing program to create very visual graphs of the responses. The program directors disseminated the survey and returned the completed surveys to me. 104 out-of-school time practitioners completed the survey. The survey begins with the following text. What do you need to engage in documentation? Documentation is a very deep and intentional form of listening, where the listener, adult or child, is so engaged in the act of listening that they are documenting what the speaker is saying by taking notes or making audio or video recordings. It is the act of gathering these recordings together with other artifacts they use to express themselves, like drawings or sculptures and photos of creations that are too difficult to explain, like block castles, miniature cities, and mud buildings. We gather this all for the purpose of reflective practice. We ask participants to rate their current understanding of the practice of documentation. 47 people selected, I currently have a good understanding of the practice of documentation. 49 people said, I currently have some understanding of the practice of documentation. And 8 people said, I know little more than what it says in the above definition about the practice of documentation. Next, we ask participants to rate the frequency that they currently practice documentation. 11 people said, I practice this type of documentation regularly. 81 people said, I occasionally practice this type of documentation. And 8 people answered, I have never practiced this type of documentation. Next, we asked them to express in their own words if they thought documentation is important, why they thought documentation is important. I analyzed, organized, and color-coded their answers according to the need they expressed. Most of their answers about why they thought documentation was important centered around the ideas of show, storytelling, and proof. These statements describe the importance of documentation to all be about the show, to show off, to show the bosses that we are doing our jobs, to show the community how awesome we are. Some statements use both the word show or storytelling and the concept of proof. These statements all describe the importance of documentation to be about providing proof or evidence, and also about using this proof to show off or to show others what we are doing. These statements all describe the importance of documentation to be about facilitating the positive development of children. It tells us how the children are doing, how they are feeling, what they are interested in, and what they are learning. Someone said, documentation is important to acknowledge the children's voice and make them feel that we understand and care about what they've done or want to do. These statements describe the importance of documentation to be about improving our practices, to evolve for the next time, to display strengths and weaknesses, and to see what works and what doesn't. These statements all describe the importance of documentation to be about using the documentation for the purpose of reflection, to reflect on an activity after the fact, to guide next steps, to look back and examine the experience. These statements describe the importance of documentation to be about keeping a historical record, to keep a history, to capture work, to have a recollection of important facts and reminders about the great things we have done. Finally, these statements describe the importance of documentation to be about what we as practitioners are learning. It helps with our understanding. It helps us all grow. We see how kids learn. We see patterns. It helps us understand how children process experiences. Someone said, it helps us learn with the children and makes us all grow, because in this way we can listen, see, or observe what kids learn, how kids learn, and how the kids improve their skills. For the multiple choice statements, participants were presented with the following statements and asked to respond using a 5-point Likert scale of strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. For every strongly agree response, the need was assigned 2 points. For every agree answer, the need was assigned 1 point. The biggest need that they expressed was to have some kind of form, tool, or checklist to help them know what kinds of documentation to gather. Next, they expressed a need for a coworker to document while they facilitated an activity. Next was a need to learn how to engage children in gathering their own documentation. Next was to be assigned the task of only gathering documentation some days so that I can learn by doing. That is the assigned anecdotist. I need designated time to watch videos of activities to practice documentation received fewer responses. And finally, I need someone who knows more about this to come to my site and work alongside me, received the least number of responses. Next, we asked them, in your own words, what other needs do you have that would help you engage in gathering documentation? The greatest number of responses all described their need to be having a second practitioner to document an activity that they are leading, another staff, an extra person, a site storyteller, having it be a duty, a distinct assigned role for the day. The next most significant need was the need to have some kind of tool or checklist and reminders to complete the product of documentation. An actual form, a notebook, a template, sheets, layout of paperwork, tools that are always available. The next need they expressed was their need to know more about the practice and examples of what it looks like, what questions to ask, knowing what it includes, more education on the subject, short trainings on documentation, more conversations, more practice. These statements all describe their need to be about making it a habit and just doing it, more practice, writing down quotes, making it a part of the activity, just remembering to do it, just practicing. Some express need for more staff and lower ratios, while others express the need to have more time, that doing an activity in 30 minutes was not enough time. Part 1 of this study focused on documentation. Part 2 focused on reflective practice. We asked, what do you need to engage in reflective practice? And provided this definition. Reflective practice is the process of discussing and interpreting documentation together with a group of critically reflective practitioners, coworkers, and or a group of children for the purpose of understanding the needs and interests of children. We do this in part so that we can facilitate amazing, enriching, meaningful experiences that emerge from these needs and interests. Reflective practice allows practitioners to hear diverse perspectives and interpretations, helping them construct their own theory base of knowledge to develop personal mastery. In our first question on reflective practice, we asked participants to rate their current understanding of reflective practice. 35 said, I currently have a good understanding of reflective practice. 57 said, I currently have some understanding of reflective practice. And 12 said, I know only what it says in the above definition about reflective practice. Then we asked participants to rate the frequency that they currently engage in reflective practice. 13 said, I engage in reflective practice regularly. 71 said, I occasionally engage in reflective practice. And 18 said, I have never engaged in reflective practice. Then we asked, in your own words, if you think reflecting with others is important, why is reflective practice important? The greatest number of responses describe the importance of reflective practice to be about improving our programs and practices, identifying what's working and what's not, for our own improvement and growth, to continuously make the experiences more engaging and more enriching. A large number of people describe the importance of reflective practice to be about learning from the diverse perspectives of others, to learn from one another, to gain new ideas and different perspectives, to understand the interests and needs of my coworkers and the kids. Others describe the importance of reflective practice to be about sharing information, communicating with each other, getting on the same page, and catching up on what you may have missed. Others said the reason reflective practice is important is all about the kids. It's about creating better experiences for children, giving children more input, providing more enriching and fulfilling experiences, giving kids a voice, self-esteem, and leadership skills. One of our people said, it gives kids a voice and self-esteem, leadership skills. Each teaches constructive criticism and lifelong learning. Others said that reflective practice is important because of relationships, sharing ideas, communication, empathy, understanding, relationships, and reminding us why we love working here. One of our people said, reflective practice encourages both empathy and understanding while providing a platform for sharing ideas comfortably and confidently, It helps communicating with coworkers better and helps us create a better workplace. Others said that reflective practice is important for our own learning, to gain knowledge, improve our techniques, to learn from each other and our experiences. Our people describe many reasons reflective practice is important. Still, one person spoke up emphatically and consistently throughout the survey, proclaiming here that, "I do not think that this is important." In the multiple choice section of the survey, participants were presented with the following statements and asked to respond using a 5-point Likert scale of strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. For every strongly disagree response, the need was assigned 2 points. For every agree answer, the need was assigned a point. The greatest need expressed was, "I need some kind of form, tool, or checklist to help me reflect with others." Next was, "I need to see examples of documentation someone else gathered to engage in reflection with others." Then, "I need to understand why reflecting with others is an important practice." Followed by, "I need more time during the program to reflect with the children." Then, "I need more designated time outside of the program hours to reflect with my coworkers." Next, I need to watch videos of activities to document and reflect with my coworkers. Finally, "I need someone who knows more about this to come to my site and reflect with us at staff meetings." In the final open-ended section, we asked, "In your own words, what other needs do you have that would help you engage in reflective practice?" The highest number of statements indicated that the biggest need for fully engaging in reflective practice is having designated time at staff meetings to reflect. More time to practice, specific time outside of program hours, a section of the agenda item on staff meetings specifically for this purpose. The next highly expressed need for engaging in reflective practice is training and learning more about the practice. Examples, models, trainings or activities that provide tips, and more information on the proper way to do reflection. Some indicated a need for engaging in reflective practice as some kind of tool, checklist, template, reminder, maybe papers with questions. Some indicated that their greatest need was just more practice and experience doing this, making this a part of the culture, intrinsic to running any activity, and just doing it. Finally, what these staff said they need to engage in reflective practice is having more time after an activity to reflect with the children, being allowed to take more time to reflect with the kids after activities in the core program. We collected and organized all of the data from the open-ended questions and from the multiple-choice survey questions about documentation, and we collected and organized all the open-ended and multiple-choice data around reflective practice. We believe that listening to children, making that listening visible, and reflecting with others on what children are telling us is beneficial. We believe that listening to practitioners, making that listening visible, and reflecting with others on what they are telling us is also beneficial. In conclusion, through this exercise of listening to the feelings, thoughts, and ideas of out-of-school-time practitioners, in order to learn more about their legitimate needs for engaging in documentation and reflective practice, I have learned more about the reality they perceive, their challenges, and their legitimate needs. This learning informs our vision, strategies, and goals for effective pedagogical leadership. The dominant need predicted before this process was the need for practitioners to understand why these practices are important. My research revealed the importance of learning by doing. Hamlin and Bryan found that practitioners do not appreciate the value of documentation and reflection until after they engage in the practice. When practitioners engage in the practices of documentation and reflection, the relevancy emerges and they discover the why as part of the learning process. Peter Moss said, "You need to want to listen in the first place, and no amount of bullet points will help you if you don't have a culture of listening." If practitioners don't want to listen, nothing we can say or do will change that. If practitioners are aligned with the pedagogy of listening, they may have already discovered the why, but hey, if you want some bullet points, we have some bullet points. Instead of us telling them why documentation and reflection is important, They told us lots of whys. When we have a culture of listening, it builds our capacity for empathy and understanding. Instead of being required to follow box curriculum, staff get to be creative and have a voice in programming. Instead of being herded like cattle from one staff-directed activity to another, children get to have a voice in programming. When everyone has a voice that is so honored and respected, it builds confidence and creates a sense of belonging. It really is all about the relationships. One reason it's important is because of the kids. Through documentation and reflection, we learn to understand and facilitate positive, holistic child development. These practices help us create more enriching, relevant, and engaging experiences for the children and for the staff. They told us that documentation and reflection is important for our own learning so that we gain information, insight, and understanding of our work. It's about viewing our work as a creative endeavor and constantly working to build our personal mastery of out-of-school time programming. They told us that through documentation and reflection, they are engaging in continuous quality improvement in all areas of our programming, in our environments, relationships, and experiences. It's a culture of inquiry that provides fuel for continuous quality improvement. Only after the process of reflection, practitioners may ask, should we share this? And if so, how? It is important to understand that the purpose of documentation and reflection is not to create a product, a panel to prove they are doing their jobs. It is all about empowerment, our own learning, and continuous quality improvement. In addition, when appropriate, it may also benefit us as a powerful method for storytelling. Our people were very clear on why they thought documentation and reflection is important. They also told us very clearly what they believe they need in order to more fully engage in these important practices. Their most frequently expressed need is the need for some kind of written tools, templates, checklists, or paper forms to help guide them through the process of documentation and reflective practice. They said that they need more designated time and the freedom to gather documentation during the core program, plus more time in the program to reflect with the kids and not being required to rush through an activity in only 30 minutes. And they need designated time during staff meetings to reflect with each other. They told us that they need interactive, hands-on training to help them understand what these practices are and why they are beneficial in our programs. And they need technical assistance walking them through the process. After being provided with a tool and some training and technical assistance on the process, they need to be assigned the role of anecdotist, so they have the freedom to focus solely on documentation sometimes. They need ample opportunities to learn by doing, create stories and examples, practice these skills over and over, and make these practices our habits and our way of being. If your documentation is needed on an activity that they are leading, they need someone else to gather documentation as they lead the activity. Finally, they told us that they need pedagogical partners who are more skilled in the approach to mentor them and walk them through the processes. They need leaders who understand where they are in the development of their own skills and are willing to meet them where they are with empathy and understanding and support, just like we do with the children. Now it is the job of our leadership to work with the practitioners to meet the needs that they have expressed. There is some apprehension around these approaches. People are a little worried and anxious about doing it right. Our message is that the only way to do it wrong is not trying. We know uncertainty is uncomfortable for some people. In order for our practitioners to improve their practices and develop personal mastery, they must get out of their comfort zone. The job of a leader is to meet the legitimate needs of their staff. Practitioners might not want to leave their comfort zone, but they may need to enter the bravery zone in order to develop their skills. The bravery zone is like the zone of proximal development for children. It is a Goldilocks zone where they are not allowed to just sit back and not engage in this approach. That's too soft. And they are not set up to fail and forced to do things that are too difficult for them. That's too hard. They are forced into the bravery zone where they can be successful with supports and assistance from the pedagogical leaders. Just right. This is a quote from my literature review that sums up my hopes and dreams for all of our practitioners. That by engaging in this approach and learning by doing, They develop a deep personal connection to and appreciation for these practices. My panel is designed to show how I went from having a very bad attitude about the whole experience to loving every minute of it. I feel that I am changed and that I could have only reached the point that I am at now through this unique experience. I had so much fun putting together all of my thoughts, feelings, and ideas. I enjoyed the process as much as figuring out what the process was. I was feeling overwhelmed on the first day. I've finally seen how everything fits together and how important it is to look back and analyze because that's the only way to learn and grow.